This presentation, titled Seeing the System, the Power of the Process-Based Audit, comes to us from Ray Haddad. Since 2007, Ray has specialized in food safety, food defense, and food fraud prevention. He has worked in quality roles, auditing, training, and consulting with varied organizations, from small family-owned to multinational food businesses, intergovernmental organizations, and regulators in New Zealand, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. As the principal trainer and managing director at Food Surety Limited, Ray is committed to supporting food professionals to do what is right with confidence so they can be successful and fulfilled, protecting consumers everywhere. And with that, take it away, Ray.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in another event from Exemplar Global. It's definitely a pleasure. This time, the topic is Seeing the System, the Power of the Process-Based Audit. I know that we're talking to experienced auditors this time and potentially some new auditors as well. And it's worth highlighting that the audits that we all do are getting more complex. More complex because the businesses we audit are getting more complex, their supply chains are getting more complex, the standards that we work with are definitely getting more complex. For example, a food safety auditor now are expected or is expected to include topics like food defense, food fraud prevention, food safety culture. Even auditors who deal with ISO standards are now expected to look at organizational risks and the context of the organization and all of that. The purpose of today's presentation is hopefully to simplify what we mean by a process-based audit, seeing the system, hopefully giving the auditors a tool that can help them to visualize the system and to navigate the different elements with ease. So the outcomes of this presentation, or the learning outcomes, would be seeing the system and its element, understanding the process-based audit approach. We'll keep things super simple, no big words or technical stuff, like simplifying things as much as we can in a way that will help us to achieve our goals from the audits, and how to relate this understanding to each step in the audit process. If we take an example of a manufacturer of apple juice, we know that this manufacturer, let's say they're a startup, they're just starting, right? They have to deal with approving ingredients, suppliers, choosing those carefully. They have to deal with recipes and processes that is capable of producing good quality juice and safe juice, meeting customers' expectations and consumers' expectations as well. Of course, the regulator will have their say, and we all know that the input from any of these different parties or elements of the big picture will have an impact on the rest. And that's why a startup, for example, this apple juice manufacturer here, they need to find the harmony in managing all of these elements to survive and thrive. If they can't, they will be in trouble. There are actually many more different elements that they need to take in consideration as well, to the like of the technology, the equipments, the team members, the shareholders' expectations, continuous improvement, and so and so. Actually, managing all of this is not easy at all. And probably some of you started a business before or potentially worked with a startup sometime. You know how fine the balance need to be. And in the next slide, I will show you some statistics from USA, actually, from the Small Business Administration. In 2019, they said that up to 21% of startups fail in year one. Up to 30% fail in year two. Even those who can find the harmony, they can find a balanced way of doing things. They might survive the first 5 years, but they might not survive the next 5. Which is interesting, and that shows us how difficult it can be. Also, it is interesting to note that even 6, 7, 8 years later, a successful business might suddenly not be successful enough and even go out of the game, if you like. A good example that I'd like to share here would be Nokia. I bet you, I don't want to say you all, but majority of you used the Nokia phone in the past. And I won't say hands up, but probably leave a comment in the comment section, right? So say Nokia if you used the Nokia phone before. And If I ask you, do you still use a Nokia phone today? It's very likely that you will say, nope, no more. We all know that Nokia were amazing phones, and as a business they were brilliant, market leader, and they were really good at what they do. But the problem is, when the context of their organization, the expectations of the consumers started to change, maybe they didn't change their product fast enough. And this is how their section or division of the business related to mobile phones ended up to be sold. So what we're saying here, that a business, especially a startup, need to find the balance of managing the different elements. Why this is all related to you, the auditor? In reality, your audit is a tool that the business have to manage their risks, to find the opportunities and utilize them. It's not about checking a checklist or yes, you are meeting a criteria or a standard. The idea is to help the business to survive and thrive. If it's a food business, part of survival and the success is to meet customers' expectations when it comes to food safety, for example. And if it's a food safety audit, that would be the focus by default. However, the goal is to help the business. Going back to our juice manufacturing startup, these guys need to understand the context of their organization. They need to understand what do they actually do. And by default, they will have a major or a key process, which is making the juice. It might involve turning inputs into outputs, it should, and it includes product development, procurement, production, distribution. There will be many other processes to support this key process, to the like of sales and marketing, quality assurance, maintenance, HR, and so. If you take a deeper look at one of these parts of the key process, for example, production, you will realize that that part is actually a process in itself, and it's made up of many different steps. And of course, each step has its inputs, outputs, and the rest, and these steps will interact with each other. For example, if we take a closer look at blending, we will see that there will be factors that will have an impact on this process step. For example, the juice itself. If it's apple juice, we need to be careful with patulin. If the patulin level in the apple juice they're blending is high, well, of course, that will have an impact on the process. It might be a risk, actually, because it's uncertainty. If the risk is mitigated, well, we're good. If not, that will lead to problems. And by the way, when we talk risks from a quality perspective, we know that it's uncertainty that might lead to positive outcome or negative outcome. Other ingredients other than the apple juice might have risks associated with them. When we blend them to make the juice, these ingredients might be non-conforming, or the personnel are not competent to operate the process well, or maybe it's the procedures and methods or the machines. So as an auditor, you need to be able to see the system and to assess how the organization see that system and how do they manage the different elements of that system in a way that help them to achieve their objectives. We have long ago moved away from auditing against a criteria, clause by clause auditing. Now it's focusing on the objectives. This is what these are the objectives that the organization said would like to achieve, and we need to see that they have processes in place to support achieving all of that. And that's what we mean by the process-based approach. Okay, going back to our turtle. So to visualize the system, there is the turtle diagram, one of the tools that you can use. If you are creative enough, you will see a turtle in every process. For example, we know that the input will go through the process to be turned into outputs. Inputs can include documents, information, as well as ingredients. Other aspects or resources that will be part of this process would be materials and equipment, resources related to the who, for example, the people involved in operating that process. Are they competent? Are they trained? Of course, we need to have clear methods, procedures, SOPs, and hopefully all of that following the process will give us the right output. And to check if it is actually the right output, we need to measure. As an auditor, you need to assess if the organization can actually see all of that and can actually manage the different elements of this process in a way that deliver results. That's why I always say, find the turtle. When you are auditing, look at the process, think of the turtle. Input, output, resources, measurements, and the procedure itself, and the supporting processes. And to add to this, when you look at this process, you actually need to look at it using two different lenses. The first one is the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, act. So for example, if I'm auditing a process here, I might ask a few questions around the planning stage. I might ask the operator, what information do you need to start this process? What ingredients do you need? Then I move into the do, for example. I might ask, how do you produce the juice? How do you do this blending, for example? Show me. What records do you keep? Then we move into the check, PDCA. So now we're going to the check. I might ask the operator, how do you know that you hit the right parameters? What do you check? And then we talk about, what do you do if there are issues? How do you know if there is something wrong, and what do you do about it? Who do you communicate it to? Questions like that. So PDCA. The other lens that you need to keep in mind when you're looking at this process would be the risk-based approach. How much time to spend on resources compared to the procedure itself, or the input versus the verification or the measurement, it's risk-based. If based on performance, for example, you know that this organization has issues with training their team members, we need to spend more time on that area. So far we're saying, hey, this is the process. You need to think of it like a turtle, try to visualize it and look at it using the right lenses during your audit. And going back to the Nokia example, they were great at having great processes, inputs, outputs. Apparently they trained their team and they were having amazing equipment. That's why their phones were bulletproof technically, and probably you have one in the, if you still have one in the drawer somewhere, probably it still works, right? But in my opinion, where they had like a problem potentially was around measuring and acting. Did they actually measure the satisfaction of the customer or the expectations of the customer? And when they knew that people started to like those iPhone things, did they act fast? Maybe not, and that's why the outcome was not great. So this is the turtle we are talking about, and try to visualize it, look at it using the right lenses. Remember that when you look at blending, you start talking about the competency of the operator. By default, you will start looking at another process and another turtle, if you'd like. So remember that there are multiple turtles. Hopefully they work together in a way that will support the organization, and if that's happening, then they have the Ninja Turtles. That's helping them really well. Okay, now let's talk about the process-based auditing in more details, if you'd like. As an auditor, you need to understand the context of the auditee, and that needs to happen at the different parts of your audit process, from the planning stage to the entry meeting, during the audit, and so. Try to understand the context. Your goal is to help the organization to understand their own context and to manage it well. So if you can't see it yourself, how can you assess if they can see it? Allocate audit resources based on risk and performance, and that's the risk-based approach we spoke about. Certain processes will require more of your resource as an auditor, and certain areas within a process might require more resources than others, based on performance, as an example. Another point to highlight would be align your audit objectives with the audit client's strategic direction. You're auditing on behalf of a standard owner, for example. Maybe in that year, given a certain context, they would like to focus on allergen management, and that's why your audit has to focus on allergen management that year. So remember that all the stakeholders and their expectations is part of that organizational context for the auditee. And the last thing to say here is your audit itself is a process. So you need to think of it as a process. Find the turtle of your own audit process and look at it using the different lenses as well, starting from the planning to the entry meeting to the conducting of the audit and so on. Right, the benefits of all of this would be the focus on results, not the process itself. It's like we don't want people to be doing what they're good at forever, because with time that won't be good enough. So always think performance, think results, and help the business to achieve their goals. And assess the management system effectiveness. Again, it's not about complying to a criteria. We still need that in a way, but definitely the goal is, does the system work? Does this process work with that process? All right. And determine the severity of identified issues. Certain issues might not be compliant, but it doesn't have too much of an impact on the objectives of the organization, the auditee, compared to some other areas that you have identified or non-conformances that might be critical to achieving the objectives of the organization. That's why they are more important. And when you start looking at it this way, you will start identifying issues that actually help the organization to succeed, to survive and thrive. The last point to mention that this will help you to manage risks or identify risks to the organization across the different functions and across different departments, not only production, for example. With that said, I reached to my summary, which is the end of my presentation. I hope by now we can see the system, and hopefully the turtle will help you to see the process, and the group of turtles means the system. And hopefully you understand the process-based audit approach tiny bit better now, or maybe that's a good refresher for you, and hopefully you can relate it to your audit steps. With that said, I'd like to thank you all. So my name is Ray, I'm from Food Surety, and I would love to, of course, connect with you all and talk more about quality and about food safety and food protection in general. I'd like to encourage you to go and conduct more audits, help organizations, auditees to achieve goals. I always say in 5 minutes, the auditor can identify an issue and save the organization $100,000, or maybe save 100 lives by identifying a critical issue and preventing it from snowballing into a bigger issue. Thank you so much. And with that said, probably I'll pass the ball back to Mike, who will wrap up this presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ray Haddad, for that look at the power of the process-based audit. And that concludes this presentation.